my name's Matt Nasser.
I'm Claudia Bass.
And I'm Bartholomew Bland, and this is How Does the Art World Work? And today we are joined by a wonderful artist and therapist, Irena Kenny, has been in practice for nearly 20 years with her art and with her therapy. And I think that she's going to bring us a really interesting take on the art world outside of some of the commercial venues or museums that we've been looking at.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Now, you originally are from the Czech Republic. Is that correct?
Actually from Czechoslovakia because I'm that old.
You predate the Czech Republic.
I predate the Czech Republic.
And can you tell us about when you were growing up in Czechoslovakia, the kind of arts training you had, and when did you sort of first become interested in the visual arts?
Well, that's a funny topic because I have a big chip on my shoulder about the way that kids are taught art in this country. So I think that we received a very formal training from grade school onward. I mean, there was a lot of schematic art. We would have to do the same thing over and over. Or when there was the anniversary of the Great Russian Revolution, everybody had to make the big boat, Aurora, that, the revolution started from and stuff like this. But we were really taught to look at things and be very serious about art and think about color theory and think about line quality from a very young age. And I don't find that happens in this country very much. And I have 2 teenage kids, and I had a really unpleasant conversation with an art teacher of my oldest child when she was in first grade, which made me think that art is really taught very, very differently, and it's kind of relegated to this
Is it
filler thing.
Is it kind of like an affirmation, a positive affirmation, that, whatever you make, and we're not going to critique it harshly, it's all very good? Did you feel like you had harsh critique when you were a student?
Absolutely. I mean, there were expectations. I think there were expectations. I don't think there's a lot of expectations, and I think art is seen as a filler within the curriculum, as most of the arts, not just visual arts, but music. I don't think that there's a lot of emphasis. I mean, after having a really unpleasant conversation with an art teacher in grade school, my kids were incredibly fortunate and got a teacher who's got this amazing view of art and is also very psychologically sound and psychologically minded, which, is really important to me as an art therapist. So I think that she really brought the kids to appreciate art and really find themselves in art and find it meaningful. And I think for me, you asked me when I started being engaged in art. I don't know whether that's how you put it.
Yes,
that's what I heard. So, for me, art was always an escape. And I grew up in not such a pleasant era. And I think art has always been a wonderful way of just figuring out what was going on inside me and putting it outside and looking at it. And sometimes you can create something that is in, disagreement with what is going on around you, but you can calm yourself down, or sometimes you can, kind of
Rev yourself up.
Puke it up on the paper and then look at it, but then you externalize and it's not there and it's not toxic to you anymore. So.
It's so true. I have 2 children, and I went to many different schools. They went to many different schools. Mm-hmm. It feels like I went there too, but not really. But the art department of each school is so particular, and it was so important for me to see. And there's certain schools that will not be named that they produce just like, I don't even know what they call that art. And it's all mass produced, and all the kids make the same object. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you recall this, but they make the same thing, and it's depending on the teacher. It's like very bizarre. It's different than having to paint the same boat or the boat on a certain moment. This is like they mass produce certain quality items that they're going to go home, but they're very, acceptable, I think. And there are other schools that are a little more edgy, and they give you more ability to be creative.
Yeah.
But you're right. Nobody gets taught like color theory, line, the importance of line. I mean, nobody gets taught all those things here. I mean, I've struggled all my life trying to get taught.
Well, Claudia, you were growing up in Mexico. Did you note those differences when you were in school?
I went to a great school. It's called the American High School, and there they teach you Mexican history and American history. They teach you sociology. They teach you both languages. You sing both national anthems. And then here your kids go to school and they can barely say hola. They can't get a second language. It's impossible to teach a second language in any of the schools, let alone good art classes. I mean, my art classes, they were relegated to like, if you wanted to do art, you go over there kind of thing. Yeah. It wasn't like a part of the curriculum.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that I find really problematic is that there is no frustration tolerance being built in the kids. So if you have a 45-minute art class and you just like, churning stuff in 45 minutes, there's not a lot that happens in 45 minutes. But you can build up on things and you can create more, expectations and working through failures. And, like if 1 week something is not working out, you then come back to it the next week and you pivot or you self-correct or you think of something completely different and you continue to create something. And that's not being done for the kids. So things are really... In Czech, we would say rychlokvaška, which is like you can make gherkins, and sometimes you make gherkins by marinating the little gherkins, and they need to marinate in order to taste really good. But there's also this one that you can just do it in 24 hours, and it's just a real quick fix for a gherkin. And I feel like our kids are doing these like...
Little pickles.
Oh, pickles. Yeah. Okay.
I love them.
Yeah.
Perhaps it loses something in translation. I like the snappy quality.
I remember my art classes in school was like, put your hand in paint and put it on the paper and make a turkey.
Oh yeah.
And everybody, that was the extent. Color theory, lines, no. But my mom was an artist, so I got supplemented with. I used to draw with her, and so that was very meaningful. So I kind of. Yeah, I'm wound up in this world in a roundabout way that way, but she seemed to have to supplement.
Yeah,
because everything was math and science and
STEM.
Yes.
And of course, now science, technology, engineering, and math, which is often used by the schools, in which we now talk about STEM to STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, art, and math. That kind of gets shoehorned into the curriculum, but there's that feeling of art being sort of shoehorned into the project.
So now you're here in America and you're dealing with these people that haven't had this. I
feel very critical. I'm sorry. I don't mean that bad.
Do you find I know you work with children and adults. I mean, you were saying you can use art in a really great way to work through these things, and I haven't had that opportunity. I think most people haven't. So now is it harder for your when you work with adults and you're using art? Is it harder for them because they don't have this as children?
So I want to be very transparent. Although I'm an art therapist, most of my sessions are talk therapy oriented and they are psychotherapy. But I do use art both with the kids and with some adults if they are open to it. What I use is imagery a lot because I think that it's really important to allow also people to visualize. So we use art therapy that way. I think that art therapy can be used not just by making physical piece, but also talking about what is happening image-wise. But it really depends. I mean, some adults are really open to it, and I tell them it's, art therapy isn't about creating beautiful pieces of art.
It's about making the turkey.
If you want to make a turkey and that's how you're feeling that day, make a turkey, gobble, gobble. But but it is more about kind of really trying to make sense of things. And you can use art therapy differently. I will never forget, I worked shortly after I graduated from Pratt, I worked at a substance abuse clinic in Brooklyn, and there was a man who just, they had some sort of a relationship with the parole office. So a lot of parolees came into the clinic, and there was a man who spent most of his life in prison, and he was in incredible amount of pain because he had a lot of spinal injuries, and he was this tall, skinny man that like was walking like a robot because he couldn't move. But he was an amazing artist, and we spent, I mean, talk about like frustration tolerance. We spent weeks and weeks and weeks in a studio working on a piece of butcher paper that was as big as this paper, and we just like work with long marks so that he could relax his body. And it was the most amazing piece of art that came out. It was like this layered mess. It is a layered mess. It's like, and he used anything available in the studio, so there's wet materials, there's like paint, there's markers, there's pencils. It was everything, and you could see him just kind of relaxing into the process and actually finding some meaning. And when it was finished, I said, well, because we're going to have the clinics always have to have an exhibition, so the art therapist is always the art lady as well, so you need to put a show on. And I told him, can you just sign your work? And he goes, well, you need to sign the work because we work together. And I thought that was just a really, and he also insisted that I keep the picture, so I actually have the painting still at home. And I think it's amazing. It's kind of like very Jackson Pollockish, but it was a great experience how you can use art therapy, just getting into your body and finding
about
yourself.
The process. It's
about the process.
And releasing and getting it out.
Yeah.
We'd like to ask a lot of our guests about their sort of origin of moving into the art world, the careerism aspect of it. So you were fairly young when you decided to become a therapist, right? I mean, had you already been working as a practicing artist? How did those two things kind of converge for you?
Well, I first heard about art therapy. I remember it pretty clearly. I heard about it. I was about 17 years old, still living in, this was still Czechoslovakia. It was shortly before the revolution in the Eastern Bloc. And there was a documentary that I watched about an organization that brought art to a residential treatment facility for people with Down syndrome. And I happened to have an uncle who had Down syndrome, and I was kind of looking at this, and I grew up making artwork with him. He was a great copier of art. It never looked like anything he was copying, like what happened on his page never actually looked like what he was looking at, but he was very dedicated to it, and I spent hours with him, growing up, just like doodling with him. And so when I saw this documentary, I thought, oh, this is like amazing because you can make art, but you can also make it meaningful and make it attached to other people. I think that there is also a part of me that thought I could never really justify being an artist, so I needed to have something else in my tool belt.
Does this sort of give you a moral heft to sort of take
I
on
don't
the
know.
psychological
I think that this is
aspects?
something that I still have to, process with my own therapist. Like, what is it about not really believing in me, in myself as an artist? I think that there was always. I grew up thinking like you have to have some sort of a profession. So art therapy sounds great because there's art and then there's psychology, so you are legit in both worlds. But I could not study art therapy at that time in Czechoslovakia or Czech Republic afterwards because the field wasn't really established. So then I moved to England for 5 years to live with my husband, and I just finished 7 years at university. I was like, I'm not going back to school. And then we moved here very shortly before 9/11, a couple of weeks before 9/11. And at that point, I was moving from London. I worked in an ad agency, and I thought, like, I'm the worst person suited for working in advertising. I was terrible at it. It was not my world. And so I signed up for art therapy degree. That was a very long answer. Sorry.
No, that's great. I mean, it's inspiring to hear like you think of the artist as locked, locked in their, creating their masterpiece, doing this, and this seems like a very connected way of making art. It has to be with people. It's engaged. It's in collaboration in a way that maybe some artists need that and they don't think that that's an option. So that's a very great story to
although it's not how it turned out. Like I now create by myself mostly, and I really cherish the loneliness of creating.
It's so fun. So fun when it works. Not so fun when it doesn't work. I had 2 weeks off, like art fair, and then a friend that came and stayed with me, a sculptor friend, and it was just like, it was fun. It was like total 2 weeks of just like doing nothing, walking around New York City, hanging out. But then I got back to the studio and I couldn't do anything. It took me forever to get back in you can't, like the minute you take distance, it just becomes a disaster. I mean, at least for me.
I think it's like running. Like you
have
get
to
really
keep
out of
it up.
shape.
You get
very
out of
fast.
shape. You get out of shape.
Yeah.
Do you think that working with clients week in and week out and spending many hours listening to their troubles, I mean, do you think that turns your art into a kind of refuge in a way to let you process that out? And if you weren't doing that kind of work, that maybe you'd be more open to sort of collaboration in your work?
I think so. I think that I really need a lot of quiet. And I mean, you've known me a while. I'm not a particularly quiet person, but I need quiet. And, you spend a lot of time like taking in other people's stories. And sometimes I just can't take in anymore. So the piece of paper is kind of a really beautiful.
And how do you think your work has changed? Because I've watched your work progress and it's become more elaborated. I think the line, if I was to think of your work, is the sort of dominant motif. Is sort of the line pops out more. Before we were talking about color theory and shape and those sort of things. But to me, when I think of your work, I think of the line before anything else. Do you think that's true? Or
I think it's spot on. I think that I was actually trying to think about my painting, and I think my paintings are kind of painterly drawings. I don't think that they are paintings.
I think that's all it is. I think a painting is a drawing. If there's no drawing, there's no painting as far as I'm concerned. I really believe in the line. But is she showing with you, Bart? Are you showing?
Not right now, but Irena has been in a couple of different group shows that we've had over the years. We did a show together at the Hudson River Museum called Strut, the Peacock in Art, Fashion, and Culture, in which you made a clockwork.
What's this with all these acronyms? Strut, Stram, what was Strut,
because that's what the peacock does. It struts. Like, that's not an acronym. That's just it was strutting.
Stem.
Yes, exactly.
Bart, so how's it going? How's your show going? You have it everywhere.
Chandelier.
It's like 3 places.
Yes, we have with the City University of New York right now, Incandescence. Here's a plug. Incandescence, the Chandelier in Contemporary Art, which is on this fall at Lehman College Art Gallery and the Shirley Fitterman Art Center and the Hall of Fame Gallery, which are all City University of New York's, some of their art galleries.
We saw one. It was really quite good.
That's right. We all got together.
Very impressed.
Really quite good. Yes,
it was very
There's so surprise in your voice.
Damning with faint praise there. I don't know about that.
Well, the reason I say that is because the space is really not a pleasant, beautiful space. It's very hard to make a good show in that space. That's my thought.
Good job.
Interesting. Yes, it's certainly, I think, a very the Shirley Fitterman Art Center is down near the World Trade Center site. So I certainly think it's a wonderful location in terms of being on the corner of a street. You could sort of see a lot of the chandeliers. If anyone's walking around near the new Perlman Theater, you could see the chandeliers incandescing in the windows. So you should come by and see them. But getting back to Irena and I worked on that show, and you were in another show I did called TikTok. You were in the same show together, actually. TikTok, Time and Contemporary Art. Claudia was showing work.
That wasn't the name of our show.
Yes, it was.
Female gaze.
No, this was years ago. This is when I
years
first
ago.
met you, and you had shown a painting
TikTok.
on.
Oh yeah, TikTok. I remember. I made that specifically for your show.
Yes, that's right. That was a.
Oh, so that's where we showed together.
Yes, and you had made a cuckoo clock.
No,
No,
I
it was
made
the
a
wolf that
huge
swallowed.
wolf. Yeah.
It's wolf that had swallowed
Yeah.
the clock,
Yeah.
right? Yes, like a Little Red Riding Hood motif. So
I made it last year in Marienbad clock. What? So did we show the female gaze together? No. Okay.
I do have a piece now. I don't know whether you heard the Brooklyn Museum, which is celebrating their 200 years, and they
Yes.
made an open call in the spring, to all Brooklyn artists over the age of 18. So
Nice.
many people
Submitted.
submitted. I think over 4,000, and there was only 200 places, and apparently 150 were already promised to establish artists. So hardly anybody got in. I did not got in, but there's a wonderful organization in Red Hook in Brooklyn that put together a salon for all the rejects.
Oh,
the refusee, based on
Refusee.
Salon des Refugees.
Based, of
That
course, on the
sounds fun.
Impressionists.
So it's in Red Hook going on right now. And
Where
there's-
is it? Where is it? Say more so people can go.
It's at the Brooklyn Waterfront Artist Community, BWAC, BWAC.
That is an acronym.
Another acronym.
The
is
other
an acronym.
one. This is the day of the acronyms.
It's in Red Hook. You know, it's really nice for people to go there. I think it's going to be open until the 13th of October, and it's open mostly on the weekends. But it's in a really nice space. And I just saw it. Hey, there's the on the screen. There's a little flyer for it.
Fantastic. What a good idea, whoever came up with it.
Very
I think
good.
it was an amazing idea, and there's some really beautiful work. So my piece is in there right now.
Wonderful. Better than the 200 that are at the Brooklyn 200.
I
yes.
mean, you know.
Of course, it goes without saying.
What have you been up to, Matt?
I've been appreciating art, going to Bart's openings across the country. No, I've been doing some improv.
How's that
and
going?
Very well. Fun, having fun.
Are we invited to anything?
No, not at all.
Where do you do it?
At the Upright Citizens Brigade.
nice.
Yeah, they just had their opening of their new theater on 14th Street. So I've been excited to perform in the space, and that's been fun. And that's about all.
And
And
your
I'm thinking
London
about.
project, what's that going to be like? The
Oh,
London-
yeah. Well, I'm working with the Great Jones Repertory, which is the company I've been with for a long time at La Mama, and we are workshopping a new project in London next month.
Oh, wow.
So we'll
exciting.
see.
Exciting.
And I was thinking about a little bit about what you were saying with, using art in therapy, how kids are taught. And we've been talking with people that work with museums and all different aspects of the art world. And, there seems to be a struggle with getting people to galleries, to museums. And I can't help but connect the lack of education in art as a foundation early on with, supporting that culture of going to these institutions. And is that a part of the work, or do you feel like you work with people and they're more they go to see art more, or in the when you see the children when they have good art or education? I don't know.
I don't think there's much of a correlation between the work that I do and people going to more or less art. I do think, like, when you just said what you said, I'm thinking about a conversation I had this morning with a friend who, for really unfortunate circumstances, had to move back to Czech Republic this summer, and she has a son who is a sophomore in high school. And we were just kind of laughing about the fact that the kids go to theater 8 times a year. They go with school. They go to museums at least once a month. So I feel like there is a real, art is considered to be a serious pursuit. It's not just
A filler.
It's not a filler, and it's not frivolous,
Yeah. It's
Well,
a profession.
I think it's when you say that they're going with the school groups to the theater 8 times a week, or not 8 times a week, 8 times a year. Yeah, 8 times a week. That would be they've become professional critics. Eight times a year. The museum once a month. What I was going to say is what that is doing is sort of inculcating into the general citizenry that most people are not going to become artists. Most people are not going to become performers. But you do need an educated populace that is going to consume the product that artists are making. And I think that's what's really happening in this country is that the number of people who are actually actively appreciating the arts is diminishing rapidly. And, there's almost sort of a mismatch between the cultural output and production, people looking for an audience of any fashion, and the number of people willing to sort of seriously engage in a conversation about theater or the visual arts. So,
and also, if there's no education about what is beautiful and what isn't beautiful, then we just go on a runaway train creating very bad stuff.
Well, that's an interesting notion because I wanted to ask both of you about that. Growing up in being trained artistically outside of the United States, do you think for the students, for let's say in Czechoslovakia, I mean, the Soviet Republic was not known for innovation in its work. It was producing very kind of highly social representational work. The Guggenheim did years ago did a show about those kinds of posters. They were really boring after a while. I mean, there was some of them were really amazing, but there was not a lot of, if you looked at China, if you looked at the Soviet Union, there was not a lot of creative innovation. It was very within a certain mode, I guess.
Very politicized.
Very politicized. But I guess what I'm asking is, how many people are, even if you're well trained in, like, let's say the Western tradition and perspective and color theory and line and all of those things, very important maybe as undergirding, but can you really move that into a creative trajectory? Like, how many people can really move beyond that?
What's the question, though?
Yeah, if you have knowledge, that doesn't mean you can't create.
What?
If you have knowledge, that doesn't mean you can't create. Creativity is one thing.
But does it necessarily?
Education is another.
I'm asking about the corollary. Does it necessarily mean that you can create if you have a kind of base of knowledge? Is the work necessarily going to be any better?
Of course it is.
I think
I don't know. I think
it's like if you have some ammunition, if you have a backpack full of things and you go into war and you have things to use, it's much better. Don't you agree?
Well, I think it's just going to be a very different quality, right? And I think that there's going to be a different expectation from yourself, and you also know that there's going to be an expectation from the audience. I mean, I have to say, like, and I'm not an expert, but I would go to galleries, and sometimes I feel like, what gives this a place in the gallery, right? Like, I don't see any artisanship in there. There's,
You're talking about craft. Craft.
Yeah,
okay.
I would like to see craft, and I think that can be a little bit, derogatory for people. But I actually want to see that this person has dedicated time to learning the craft of the art. I'm kind of like thinking, if I want to ask you to build me a house, I would love if you had some self-expression. If if you like kind of like tell me like, oh, this would be really great. You can have a like really cool Tourette here, and I was like, amazing. I can have a little little spiky thing that's great. But if you're just going to throw it and then it's going to fall the next time it rains because you just thought of the shape and it sounded really great, but it's going to be shitty.
The undergirding is not there.
The undergirding isn't there. Like, I want you to know what you're doing and then be creative.
Are we allowed to say shitty?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm kidding.
We can say
I'm kidding,
it.
Yes. Okay.
Just like my turkey. Shitty.
Your turkey had wonderful undergirding. I don't know what you're talking about. Hands of a pianist.
Yeah.
So this
I
was
take your point.
fun.
Yes.
Nice to have you.
Thank you.
Very
Thank
interesting.
you
Thank you for
having
coming
me.
on.
And I'm sorry for being so critical.
No,
this is, we're getting the different perspectives. And
Nothing
this
is
is
not critical.
a very important one. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. See you next time.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.